I've been getting a lot of questions to show how to plot indicators using the free TradingView charting library. So in this video, we're going to cover that. Like I did in the last video, I'm going to increase the playback speed when I write the code as to not make this video too long. I'm going to need a proxy server like I did in the first video to handle the API calls and also calculate the indicator values. So we're going to have two parts to the code. First one is the proxy server to handle the API calls and calculate the indicator values, and then the UI where we'll create the HTML page and the client-side JavaScript code to render the charts. I tried to do everything on the front-end side without having to use a proxy server, but I couldn't find a library to calculate the indicator values. I could get away with it by using a framework like React or some kind of bundler like Parcel or Webpack, but I did not want to complicate things and want to keep it simple, so I'm going to do it with the approach that I already discussed in one of my previous videos. Alright, let's begin. Let's start with building the proxy server. First, let's initialize the project. Then let's install all the dependencies. I need GOT module to handle the API calls. I'm going to install the previous version of GOT because the current version I won't be able to use it using the required module. Next, I need Express to make the API, and then CORS to include the CORS header and ToLint to calculate the indicators. Then let me create the index.js file. And I'm just going to add the script so that I don't have to restart the program every time I change the code. I have NodeMon installed globally. If not, you can install NodeMon here and create the script. Let's start the server. Cool, it's running. Now I'll minimize this, and whenever I change the code, the server restarts automatically. Now let's start writing the code. First, let's create the Express server. Let's create a simple route. Let's run this URL from the browser and see if this works. As you can see, the proxy server works perfectly. Now let's create a route that returns the Binance candlestick data for a given symbol and time frame. It's going to have two parameters. The first one is symbol and the other one is interval, as in the time frame. And then it's going to take a callback function, which is obviously asynchronous. And let's first wrap everything in try-catch module. First, let's destructure symbol and interval from params. Now let's make the API call. Before we do that, I need to import the GOT module. Let's copy this URL and change the symbol with the symbol and interval with the interval. Then let's send this data. Going to specify start BTC, and run this. As you can see, the data is visible, but it's not in the format that we want. Remember, in the last video, we need the data in a specific format, right? We need the open price, open close, high low, and the open timestamp. So let's structure the data in that format. Then let's return the structured data. Let's refresh this page. That looks good. This is in the format that we need. Now let's go back to the UI and plot this data first. So I'm going to initialize the HTML file. I'm going to set the title as Tradingview Indicators. And I'm going to create a div element to host the chart. I'm going to import the TradingView charting library. And I'm also going to import the script index.js file where we're going to write the code. And I'm not going to pass the styling in the chart properties like I did last time. I'm going to define the styling here itself. I'm going to set the position to absolute and give it a width of 100 view width and height of 100 view height to make it fit the entire screen. These are pretty basic stuff, guys, so I'm not spending too much time explaining each and every step. Now let's go to index.js file and plot this chart. Let's create a get data function to get the data from the proxy server. I'm just going to paste this URL over here. For now, let's just console log the data and see if we're able to retrieve this data. Let's refresh this tab, and if I hit developer tools, okay, I need to run this function. You can see that we run into CORS issue. So to resolve that, let's add the CORS header in the proxy server. Now let's run this again. You can see that it's gone, the error is gone, and we're able to see the data in the format that we want. Now let's plot this chart. I'm going to create a function called render chart. First, I'm going to create chart properties. Let's update this getData function to return the data. These are pretty straightforward steps, guys. Steps that we did in the last video. Just create the chart properties, create the chart and create the candlestick series, retrieve the data, and then pass it to the candlestick series. Now let's run this function. Let's go back to the chart. Awesome. So you're able to display the chart. Now let's start adding indicators. First, let's start with simple moving average. Let's look at the documentation to calculate the simple moving average. So we're going to take the closing prices into an array and then pass it along with the length, and we get a callback function that returns the simple moving average values. So I don't prefer to use callback functions because they get really messy and the code is generally not so clean. So I prefer to use promises. So I'm going to promisify this function and use await, async await, and then use it in the code so that the code is much cleaner. I'm also going to create a separate module called indicators, inside which I'm going to write all the code for indicators. As we discussed earlier, I've promisified this simple moving average function, and first I'm taking all the closing prices and then I'm going to pass the data to this function and return an updated data which includes the simple moving average. So I'm going to calculate the simple moving average for 100, and then the length of the results array is going to be less than the length of the main array, because let's say we're calculating SMA 100, right? Then we need at least 100 candles. So the actual results are going to start from the 100th candle. So the first 99 values are going to be empty. So to account for that, we're going to calculate the difference and create an empty value array for the differences, and then populate the simple moving average value in the data and return it. Let's export this function from this module. Here, let's first import the function and then calculate the values and then return the data in the API response. I'm going to change this into let because we're going to modify the scale and data function as we keep adding more indicators. Now let's refresh the page and see if we are able to see the simple moving average values in the response. As you can see, we are able to see the simple moving average values. Like I said, the first few values are going to be empty, but as we scroll down, you will start to see that the values are actually being returned in the response. Now let's go to the UI and include the simple moving average on the chart. I first created this SMA series and I want to set some default attributes as in the color as red and line width equal to 1, and then I'm going to get the simple moving average data in the required format and then pass it on to the series. So this pattern is going to repeat in the future indicators as well. So create the series, get the data, and then add the data to the indicator. Now let's see if the data is shown on the chart. As you can see, the moving average, simple moving average 100 is shown on the chart in this red line. Awesome. Now let's move on to the next indicator. Next, we're going to add exponential moving average. The code is going to be pretty similar. So I'm going to copy these functions and then update it to calculate EMA. As you can see, I created this async function and calculated EMA 21 for the given series and exported that function from this module. Here, let's import the function and add it to the series and then return the data in the response. That's it. Now let's refresh the API and see if you're able to see EMA. Awesome. You can now see exponential moving average in the response. Now let's go back to the UI and add this data onto the chart. Done. Now let's refresh the chart and see if we can see. I want to change the color to green. Now let's refresh the page and see if you're able to see the moving average. Awesome. You can now see two moving averages. One is SMA 100, the other one is EMA 21. Now that we have SMA 100 and EMA 21, let's plot some markers. As in, let's plot some long and short signal based on some criteria. So let's say when EMA 21 crosses over SMA 100, I'm going to consider that as a long signal, and whenever it crosses under SMA 100, I'm going to consider that as a short signal, and I'm going to plot that over the candle in the form of an arrow. So let's do that. First, let's create a function to identify those long and short signals, and I'm not going to need ToolInt library for that. I'm just going to calculate this. As you can see, I just created this markers inc function that checks for the crossover or cross under and then returns the data with the long and short signals. And I'm going to export this function from this module. Here, let's import the module and, like always, just calculate the values and return the data in the response. Now let's refresh the page and see if we have long and short signals in the data. Awesome. You can now see the long and short signals in the response. Now let's go to the UI and plot them on the chart. That's it. So whenever there's a long signal, I want to plot it below the bar in green color with arrow up and text as long. And similarly, if it's a short signal, then plot it above the bar in red color with the text short. So let's refresh the chart and see if we can see the markers. Awesome. So you can now see the long and short signal. So here we have a short signal, and here EMA 21 is crossing over SMA 100. So you see a long signal, and yeah, so the markers are plotted correctly on the chart. So RSI is going to be very similar to SMA and EMA. So we just have to pass the data series along with the length, and it returns the RSI value. So I'm going to calculate RSI for the length of 21. So let's do that. So I just created this RSI async function and then used it inside this RSI include function to calculate RSI 21, and then I returned this function from this module. Here, like always, let's import that module and include RSI in the API response. Now let's refresh the page and see if we can find RSI value in the response. Awesome, so the RSI values are showing up. Again, the first few values are going to be null, but as you scroll down, you should start seeing the RSI values. That's great. Now let's go back to the UI and plot the RSI values. So RSI is slightly different from the indicators that we plotted so far, right? So the exponential moving average or simple moving average, they're going to be plotted on the existing chart. So they're going to share the same y-axis. So it's easier to just plot it on the same chart. RSI, it works slightly differently, right? It needs its own panel because it doesn't share the y-axis with the existing chart. So we need to plot it below the current chart. So the way to do it is to create a different pane for this chart. So the default pane where we have the charts right now is considered as pane 0, and we're going to add another pane below and call it pane 1 and add RSI to that window. So let's do that. So now let's change the first one to pane 0 and RSI to pane 1. Now let's refresh the page and see if we can find RSI indicator. Awesome, so you can now see RSI indicator plotted right below the existing chart. And you can also adjust the height of this window. You can just do it dynamically from the UI itself, which is, very convenient. So that's how you add RSI value. Finally, let's add MACD indicator. MACD indicator also works slightly different from the other indicators that we added. First of all, it requires a separate pane like we did with RSI, and unlike RSI and moving averages, it takes 3 input parameters. So if you look at the documentation, it takes 3 input parameters. First one is the short period, the long period, and the last one is signal period. And it also returns 3 results. The first one is the fast length, the second one is slow length, and the third one is histogram. So we need to plot 3 indicators to plot MACD. So let's do that. So as always, I just created an async version of this indicator and then copied one of the existing functions for moving averages and calculated the MACD values for 12, 26 and 9. So 12 is the fast length, 26 is the slow length, and then 9 is the histogram length. And we return 3 results. The first one is MACD fast, MACD slow, and MACD histogram, and then we export from this module. Here again, let's import the module and include MACD values in the API result. Now let's refresh the page and see if we find MACD values in the response. Awesome, so you have MACD values in the response. And again, the initial few values will be null, but as you scroll down, you will start to find the values being populated. Alright, now let's go to the UI and display MACD indicator on the chart. First, let's plot the fast length. Let's go to the chart and see. Awesome. So you can now see the fast MACD length displayed on the chart on a separate pane. Now let's add the slow length. I'm just going to copy this code and change it to slow length. Let's save this. Okay, instead of it is showing in blue color, instead I would display this in red color. Let's refresh the page. Awesome. So now you can see the slow length in red color. Now let's plot the histogram. Let's see. Awesome. So you can now see the histogram as well. I don't really like the color of this histogram. I would prefer to have it green when it's above 0 and red when it's negative. So let's change that. So instead of defining a global color in the histogram series, you can pass it along with the data. So let's do that. So as you can see, along with the data, I'm passing the color attribute as well. And whenever it's 0, above 0, I'm making it green, otherwise make it red. So let's see how it looks now. Awesome. So it looks much better. So there you go. So this is how you plot indicators. I think in this video I covered a lot of different types of indicators. We have overlaid indicators like SMA and EMA that we directly plot on the chart and that shares the same y-axis. And then I showed you how to plot markers like long and short signals on the candlestick bars, and also plot RSI or MACD on separate panes which have their own y-axis but share the same x-axis. Before I wrap up the video, I want to give a quick shout out to Adrian from Hong Kong. So if you observed carefully, I have not used the standard TradingView charting library in today's project. So the standard library does not support multiple panes. So you wouldn't be able to add MACD or RSI with the standard charting library. So what Adrian did is he took this standard library and added multiple pane features, and he was kind enough to make those updates public. A big shout out to Adrian for doing this, and we get to enjoy the fruits of his labor. He was also kind enough to leave a JS fiddle, which is what actually inspired me to make this video. There is also a pull request to merge this code into the existing TradingView branch, but from what I can understand, it was not accepted because TradingView development team would like to keep things simple, and they believe this change is going to complicate things. Anyways, if you're interested to know the full background about this update, I'll leave a link to this issue in the description box. You can check it out. That's it for this video. I hope you have a great day, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye.